Right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Don Odells Legends. My name is Art Tipaldi. I'm the editor of Blues Music Magazine. And Don here at Legends always is bringing in talent from around the country, great blues talent, great musical talents. Today we're honored to have one of the new gunslingers out there of guitar, Tyler Morris. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you.
And we also have from Tyler's label, VizTone, Rosie Rosenblatt out of Boston, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, Boston.
Glad to be here.
And Rosie and I have known each other for years. Before VizTone, Rosie was the founder and owner of Tone Cool Records back in the 90s into what year, Rosie?
It was 20 years as we started in 85.
Started in 85, okay.
Yeah.
So it went to 05.
Yep.
And I know back in the 90s you had Rick Holmstrom, Rod Piazza, Susan Tedeschi, tons of people on
North
there.
Mississippi All-Stars.
North Mississippi All-Stars, their debut CD.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about Rosie, but Tyler, you're the man of the hour right now. This is, Tyler's 19 years old, graduated high school 2 years ago?
Yeah, in 2016.
In 2016. And we're holding up here the current CD that he's going to be performing tonight. This is your third CD. How is this, what's the progression from the first CD to this CD? Where's this CD gone from those first two?
So stylistically, the first CD it had some vocals, but it was more of a rock CD, as was the second. And the second was actually an instrumental CD.
Okay.
But the third CD, I would say, is a fully blues CD. There's still some rock influence, but it's definitely a blues-based, rooted in the blues CD.
Okay. Yeah, I know when I listen to it, I hear a lot of that 70s blues rock that probably was birthed by the Led Zeppelins of the world, and then it went through there. Is that safe to say that that's the foundation of it?
Yeah, I would say groups like Aerosmith, Ritchie Blackmore, and all those kind of 70s British rockers, it inspired me, definitely.
Right. Well, you know, some people like to say that a CD tells a story. What's the story that this CD tells?
I would say it's as we were talking about, it's really more of my progression over the in between the second album and the third album. I've been listening to guys like Freddie King and Albert King, and I've been going back to the 70s music.
Right.
And it's more my way of paying tribute while writing my own style.
Okay.
And putting that in my own.
Were you writing this CD from the time that the second CD was done? And I mean, was that sort of the direction of your career?
Yeah, I actually, some of the songs were actually written even before the second CD started.
Okay.
And some of them were written as late as a month before we started recording.
Right.
And I'm constantly writing. I currently have over 100 songs on at home in my studio.
Wow.
For demos, and basically it's an everyday thing where I'll go and I'll record in Logic. I'll record any ideas I have, and then throughout the week I'll kind of progress those ideas, and I try to write multiple times a day whenever I have the chance.
Wow. Now, you and I were talking out earlier before we came in here about your writing process. You're not a vocalist. You're not singing on this new CD. What were you telling me about how you write for vocals?
So almost on every song, the first thing I do is I write the melody, and after a melody, I write the lyrics. So I've always been into writing the vocals. I've just found on this stuff, it's not quite in my range. I do sing a little bit though. So basically, my process for that is once I have all the songs done, I'll send it off to the vocalist. We have Joe Louis Walker and Morten Friedheim on this record. So I sent off my lyrics, and then I sent off my melodies to those two guys. And then we sat down and we went over some of the stuff after they sent me some demo takes. And I mean, especially those two guys nailed it right away in one or two takes. But I sit down with them and we make sure that everything is what my original intention, but those guys are just great.
Right. So at times then you become a producer of vocals, so you're telling them how you want them to sound. Now I notice also on this CD you have Paul Nelson producing. For those viewers out there who don't know, Paul Nelson had been with Johnny Winter through Johnny's the latter part of his career, produced a lot of Johnny's stuff. What was it like working with Paul?
Paul was great. he brought in Scott Spray, who was Johnny's bass player actually, and he brought in Tiger McNeil from Jose Felicianos, and it was great to work with him in the studio, and I love his method of doing the album over 1 week, because you get the ideas fresh.
Right.
And there's not much on my first 2 records. That's another thing. It was more like a month of being in the studio, and it would kind of be, if you're having a day where it's not as productive, you could take a week to think about it. Whereas if you have 3 days that are all consistently productive, then it's fresh. That's how a lot of the records I listen to were recorded. So that's another thing I always want to do it, and it worked great with Paul, because that's how he likes to do everything.
Right. Now, do you find is it challenging to get the live energy onto a disc, or how challenging is that?
I would say the hard part is when you have multiple rhythm tracks and harmony tracks in certain songs, and you have to in the studio we'll designate a day for rhythms and a day for lead.
Okay.
Whereas live, you're playing all the parts together. So when I write the song, I'll kind of write it how the parts are together, and then you have to separate them for a disc.
Right.
But I would say in this time, when we did all the rhythm tracks, we played them all in the live room, me, Tiger, and Scott.
Okay.
So it was more like a live performance than in the past.
Right. And you have horns on this CD.
Oh, yeah.
Was that also part of your thinking when you're thinking of a song? Did you have certain songs that you wanted to add horns to?
Yeah, there's a song specific, Choppin', which is kind of my homage to a Freddie King instrumental, like The Stumble and stuff like that. And what was funny was when we were in the studio, me and Paul were kind of hearing it as a B.B. King walk-on song when he has the whole brass section, and we kind of decided, we're like, let's get some horns on this song.
Right, yeah. Rosie, can you talk a little bit about how you found Tyler, or how Tyler found you?
Well, I mean, I've been aware of Tyler for quite a while.
Okay.
Just, other associations and people we both play with and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, he's locally lives 5 minutes from me, fortunately. And
right. Yeah.
I sort of follow Danny Goldberg's old premise, which is how secret of success is you walk around until you bump into a genius,
right,
and then you hold on for as long as you can.
Yeah. Can you explain to our viewers what VizTone does for artists like Tyler?
VizTone we're a label group. We're not exactly a record label. I used to run a record label, and that model doesn't really work so well anymore.
Yeah.
So we're more of a partnership. We work with artists who produce their own music, and often will manufacture their own music, and they own their music, but we distribute it through Red Eye Worldwide, which is a great distributor, and we handle the promotion and the publicity and the marketing. We sort of have a partnership with the artists. And, it started kind of slow, and Bob Margolin was my partner, and Amy Bratt too. And now we have over 100 releases, and we're doing okay.
Wow, over 100 releases over what time period?
About 10 years.
10 years. How does an artist get to be part of the VizTone family?
Well, it's like, how do you get to Carnegie Hall?
practice.
Yeah, I mean, we have you can reach us through the internet pretty easily, but usually we work with an artist who is likely to be able to sell some records, and to do that you have to have either a sales history or a good touring thing, or be totally amazing.
Okay.
So if you have one of those 3 things happening, then give us a call.
Yeah, and if you have 2 of those 3.
If you have 2 of those things happening, I'll call you.
Yeah, I'll call you. Yeah, good. So Tyler, how did you discover the guitar, the music? How did you discover music?
Well, so my dad was always a musician and a collector of instruments, and at an early age, I would say about when I was 4, I would go down and I would try to play with his band, and I mean, of course, at that time I hadn't sat down, I hadn't learned anything about guitar, but he would tune my guitar to an open D for Stone songs, and I would kind of play along, thinking that, I was a part of the band. Right. And that went on for a while, but it wasn't until I was about 11 that I sat down and said, I'm going to learn guitar.
Really? And tell me about the process of learning. What were the peaks and valleys of that like?
So I really, I mean, it was a lot of practice. I practiced about 8 hours a day from the time I was in middle school till the end of high school.
Wow.
And I still do about 2. It's just a little harder with jobs and in school and everything.
Yeah.
But I still do a minimum of 2. And basically, there's a difference between practice and play. And I find play is more of the ear training, where I would sit down, I would listen to records, and I would learn the notes more exact.
Right.
And then you find that 5 years later, if you go back to the same record,
Yeah.
you learn the stuff that you learned. Your ears are now
Hearing other
you're
parts of it.
you're hearing other things. And
Right.
that's how a lot of the players, I would read in interviews by Blackmore and Van Halen, and they would sit down and learn Clapton records, or well, at least for Van Halen,
Yeah.
and he would play the stuff kind of differently than how Clapton would finger it, and then he would think of his own licks,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a culmination of of hearing, and then if you can't quite play something, you do a little technique work, and
Right.
and you practice the technique. So it's a culmination of a little bit of technique and a whole lot of hearing.
Right. Were you taking lessons at this time also?
Yeah, I took lessons early on. I took them from actually Joe Stump at Berkeley for a while, and up until through high school.
Okay.
Up until I started college.
Yeah, yeah. Were you like a natural at the guitar when you picked it up at 11?
Yeah,
I mean, when you picked it up at 11, you were looking to be more serious about it than just playing open D tuning for Stones.
Yeah, so like I had said, I'd been around it so long, and
Yeah.
I was so into it that I thought of myself as a guitar player even
Right.
before I could play. So I picked it up, and the first thing we did actually in the first few months of playing is I went to blues jams, and one thing that I've always had, I can't explain, I've always had the vibrato in the sense of kind of what notes sound good.
Okay.
So early on, even before I started, my first few blues jams, I noticed I had this kind of vibrato
Right.
already from, I don't know if it's from hearing or it's just something that you're kind of, I mean, vibrato is unique for everyone, so I don't know
Right.
if it's just something I was born with. But that's what I had early on.
Yeah.
And really, I would say that combined with my practice is how I got to learn so many different styles and write my own music.
Right, yeah. Well, it sounds like you're learning from lessons, you're learning from jams, and you're learning from listening to records. Which one did you put the most time in with?
I would say definitely listening to records, because I mean, when you have lessons, that's the time to ask if there's a technique, or there's like, oh, there's this thing that Jimi Hendrix uses where he uses thumb, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
That was something where I didn't think of that. And I asked my teacher, and he's like, "Oh, he just uses the thumb,"
Right.
and it became one of these things where
Yeah.
where I went back to the records. But
Yeah.
I would say in between the lesson time, that's when you're putting the 8 hours in a day to actually listen. And if a lot of people, I'll find people who have a lot of talent, but if they don't listen to the records, they don't they'll know all the scales and the chords
Right.
to play, but
Yeah.
they just don't know they don't know the language. You
Right.
need to learn the language,
Right.
and that's what the record.
It's funny because that was a question I wrote down after reading so much of your stuff and listening. Tell us about the importance of learning the language of all these different people.
And the vocabulary.
Yeah, yeah. How important is that?
So I mean, I find there's a lot of people that I'll encounter who will know they don't know the scales and will know theory, but the issue is they can't. When you connect it, it's like you'll go to a guitar store and you'll hear a guy, and it'll sound like he's playing a textbook.
Right.
And I mean, there's a purpose for that, to learn technique, but if you don't sit down and learn the records, you can't actually string it together. And it's not a lot of people think it's a mental thing where you're trying to think, oh, I'm gonna play this note, or I'm going
Right.
to play this lick from Freddie King in this way, and you kind of have to learn how to hear it,
Yeah.
so that you're not thinking, because if you start thinking, that's when you mess up.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. I always use the
Oh, yeah.
the skiing analogy. You know, when you're going down a hill and you're not thinking, you're doing really well. The minute I start to think about the hill, ba-doom, 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 I'm on the ground. You know, yeah. But you were saying, like, you know, I wanted a Freddie King such and such on that song. I wanted it to sound like a BB King intro. You know, you have to know that language inside of you, and also to communicate with other musicians. You know, when you're talking to, let's say, a Joe Louis Walker, and he says, okay, we're going to do a Chicago shuffle, you immediately have to know how to translate that into music. And I think that's what a lot of people don't get, is that oh, never mind. I read here all the different people that you've examined and analyzed, and you called it like whoever did your deconstructing the Aerosmith, deconstructing Stevie Ray Vaughan. Can you explain that process to me?
Well, so as kind of a timeline of learning, so I started with the blues, and my dad's favorite guitar player has always been Clapton, as well as one of mine. So I started with those kind of players. Then I moved on to more Aerosmith and
Right.
Van Halen for many years.
Yeah.
And then I went. What happened was I was in kind of a Van Halen stage.
Yeah.
In that type of music, and I would listen to specific phrasings, and I would go back to Clapton, and then from Clapton I would get what he was doing, but
Yeah.
I wanted to know how he got that. So I would
Right.
go back to Freddie and Albert, and then T-Bone,
Yeah.
and all the way back to Robert Johnson, of course.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
it's once you learn the influences of your favorite artists, and even the influences of those guys, you not only do you better understand it, but you have all this vocabulary.
Right.
And I mean, I don't think if someone's trying to play like in the style of Ritchie Blackmore, for example, if they have never played a 1-4-5, I don't think they can do it. And it's not even like his songs are
Right.
in the blues format.
Right, yeah. Wow. So 8 hours a day practicing through high school. What's it like being the guitar blues nerd in a 1990s, in a 2000 hip hop world?
Well, I mean, it's difficult in some situations in school, because there's a lot of people who are into hip hop, but then there's a large amount of people who understand that the hip hop is rooted in the blues, and there's a lot of people who are into guys like Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith and more the pop bands. And I would try to, when people would approach me who would be into more like Guns N' Roses or Aerosmith, but they're more like, I don't want to miss a thing, they're pop stuff.
Yeah.
Then I would show them, I would be like, oh, well, listen to this recording of Slash playing Going Down. And then they would say, oh, I like that song, and I would try to turn them on to Freddie or someone like that. And there's a lot of conversation to be had for people who listen to other music.
Yeah, yeah. Did you find acceptance in high school or middle school as a guitar player, or were you kind of on the outside for a while?
More in high school. I was more. I always did kind of performances at my school, but in high school, once I released the first record, I was actually able to do a full-length performance in school, and I did a interview type thing where I did a presentation on my record.
Right.
And that after that was freshman year, so after that I got to know more people, and coming into a new school was very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. If a CD is a calling card, let's say, what's the CD say when you give it to people? What does the card say about Tyler Morris?
I think it really tells my story as a writer. The other CDs were more about my playing and about melodies.
Yeah.
Whereas now my mindset is I've always wanted to write songs, and that's what I really do. I think that's the most important thing about music. So I think this is really a songwriter's album.
Nice, that's great. And I noticed tonight you're playing with a trio and a vocalist. What does the trio give to you as a guitar player now? What's the advantages of that?
Well, I always think so bass and drums are the foundation of everything. So it's great. We have Don Culp on drums. It's great having someone who's just so rhythmic, and he plays a variety of styles. Plays some percussion instruments. So bringing in different styles of music, it sparks inspiration when I'm improvising. And everything.
Right. And you know that they're always going to be there as that foundation.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that you can come back to. You talked about inspiration. I know we talked out in the lobby here. You just got back from a trip to Memphis in February for the International Blues Challenge. You played at Rosie's VizTone Jam. You're going down to Memphis for the Blues Music Awards in May. What kinds of inspiration did you get from that trip?
Well, the first thing right from the airport before checking into the hotel.
The smell of barbecue in the air?
Oh, yeah. Well, we had to make a stop at Stax and Sun.
Oh, wow.
Right before even checking into the hotel.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, especially, both of them were incredible, but in Sun, seeing what a small room that all this history happened.
That's right.
And then it was just, it was mesmerizing because I've heard those songs so many times, and they're all recorded in one room.
Nice. When you say you went to Stax, and as a songwriter now, I should say as a musician with an emphasis on songwriting, have you seen an influence of being in Stax in your writing, in your arranging in your head?
In the new songs that I've been writing, definitely.
Yeah.
And even some of the, as I write lyrics for my new stuff, some of them have even been influenced by Memphis.
Yeah.
And I found, but definitely that whole experience is changing both in my music and just in mindset too.
Did you make connections with other, because I know Memphis, the Blues Foundation does a youth showcase where they have youth bands at a number of venues. Were you able to connect with kids your own age down there?
Yeah, I did meet some kids and saw some familiar faces of people who I already know.
Yeah, and with social media such as it is, it's really easy to keep in touch.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, great, Tyler. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you.
Rosie, thank you for being here with him.
Thank you, Art.
And, I see a great partnership here with you two guys. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, Tyler Morris and the Tyler Morris Band.